I'm Dr. Logan Toon, Assistant Superintendent for the school district, and I'm going to be moderating the discussion tonight. Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to our panelists. So our theme for today is preparing today's students for the future of tomorrow. And we have a rock star panel here to talk about a few of the issues that are facing our students on the digital learning, personalized learning, and future-ready front. So we have Mr. Eran Megiddo, who is Corporate Vice President for OneNote, Wunderlist, and Education for the Microsoft Corporation. We have Mr. Aaron Sconard, who's the co-founder and Chief Executive Officer for Pluralsight. We have Superintendent Reed Newey of the Davis School District. We have Ms. Heather Barnes, who is Vice President for Client Services and Partner Channel at MarketStar. And we have Ms. Bonze Hewitt, who is the principal at Canyon Creek Elementary, our only Microsoft Showcase school for now in Davis School District. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all. I hope this is an evening that's worthwhile for you. I feel like we have an amazing perspective from a lot of different areas, and we're just going to get right to it. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down. I'm going to ask each of these panelists to give you a little background on who they are, kind of how they came to work in the area that they came to work, and kind of what their passion point is for teaching and learning and digital instruction and personalization for preparing our students for the future. So, Mr. Megiddo, let me start with you. You're up.
I chose the wrong seat. We talked about it and you did not tell me. First of all, actually, I want to say thank you on behalf of Davis for inviting us and Superintendent Newey. It's a pleasure and honor. I've been meaning to come and visit for the better part of this year. I'm happy to do it before the end of the school year. Our partnership is fantastic, and being here with the team broadly, learning and hearing and interacting with the schools and everybody here is just a great opportunity for us. So thank you on behalf of all of Microsoft and all the teams back in Redmond and around the world that work on the products that you guys use and hopefully are helping kids in the schools around here. My background personally and just by way of introduction, I'm going to start with schools if we're going to talk about schools. My father was a diplomat, and therefore I grew up going to different schools every 2 to 3 years and moved around and saw very different educational experiences over those years. And then from there, because I'm originally from Israel, did not go into college first, but actually went into the Army and mandatory service. And over the course of the better part of a decade in the Army, both in the middle and after, tried going to college, and for what it's worth, and what might be a confusing message to some, dropped out of college twice, and now run education for Microsoft. So there's something to be said for Microsoft choosing who runs education, is probably the truth. But along that period after the Army, I did a couple years or a couple of startups, not a couple years, and one of them was in ed tech, and that was my first. This is back in the '90s, mid '90s, and that was my first experience building software for schools and students. It was math, personalized math learning, and already there I saw just the impact and possibility of what technology can have, and frankly connected between that and what technology did for me growing up. I was a product of the 80s and 90s computer revolution and hacking revolution, grew up teaching myself to code, never went to college, but coded and built startups and eventually made it to Microsoft. And look today and fuel today kind of like what technology that we have now can go do for kids in the same way that it did for me, and in the same way that I see every time I visit a school and a district around the world, frankly. So it is what the kids are doing and what they can do, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. Sconard.
Yeah, look, it's awesome for me to be here tonight. I have 5 children who have benefited from Davis School District. And I've got 3 that are actively going to school right now. And I want to acknowledge Superintendent Newey for his leadership. This district is leading the state with innovation, technology, how we're thinking about the future of educating our children. So thank you for that. And thank you to all the principals, thank you to the teachers who are here, the tech specialists, especially, and just what you're doing to innovate and really change the game for education in the future. We're really blessed to live here and be here with you. My personal journey started when I was about 8 years old, and my dad brought home one of the first Apple II computers. Did anybody here have one of those? Okay, that was the magical moment for me with technology. We were poor growing up. I grew up in Oregon and southeast Portland, and it was inner city. We shouldn't have had a computer. Like, we really didn't have the money to have a computer. But my dad knew that there was something in that device that held opportunity, that was going to change the future that his children would live. And so he scrambled and figured out a way to bring one of those home, and then we went down to our basement on a concrete floor, set up a makeshift workstation, booted it up for the first time, and saw the magical green lights. And then I was like, where's all the games? And at that point, there were no games. Like, you had to actually create them. And so like the whole journey with that Apple II was learning how to code. That was the fun part. The fun part was learning how to tell this piece of technology to do things like a human being would do. And so we wrote games, we played those games, and that started this journey. And by the way, my father was a CPA. He was not a tech person. He had no business teaching me how to code, but we sat down together, cracked open a basic programming book, and learned together. And it started me on this whole journey, which has become a lifelong journey for me, around teaching people that very same skill, teaching people about technology. Fast forward more than 20 years, and Pluralsight was born. And Pluralsight is really intended to give that same gift that my father gave to me to people all over the world. Our business is committed to democratizing tech skills. We want to give anyone, anywhere, access to the future that tech can create for them, that future opportunity. So that's what Pluralsight's all about. We focus primarily on the corporate sector. So we sell to some of the biggest businesses around the world. We're in about 70% of the Fortune 500 today. We have about 17,000 business customers total. And we have millions of individual learners who are all over the globe. We have individual learners in over 150 different countries who use our platform to get access to experts who are also all over the world, who write the courses that we put into our platform, so they can create a new future for themselves. So we serve the businesses, and we train the people, and we bring them together. And so another way of saying our mission is we're closing the skills gap. Here in Utah, we have 5,000 open computing jobs right now today. In the country, there's over 500,000, and the gap's getting bigger every year. And Pluralsight's committed to helping with closing that gap over time by giving more people more access to it. And one of my personal passions outside of my business is getting computer science in every school. And we're committed to that here in Utah. We are committed to seeing that happen by the end of 2022. And we're working closely with the governor, the legislature to make that happen. And we're making a lot of progress. And I know that it's through the innovative people who are here tonight that we can create that together. It's not going to happen without all of you. So I'm excited to talk about that a bit tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Reed Newey, Superintendent. I'm honored every day to come to work for Davis School District and for you. I think it's the greatest school district in the country, and I've been telling these guys that, and we're glad they're here to see it in person. We're just so honored to have you here tonight and for the work you do every day. For me, my personal, first of all, I'd like to recognize the panelists. Ron, when we went with Microsoft my first year, I was kind of joking. Ron took me down a hallway, had to be a mile long. We went in this room, and it was kind of Truman Show-esque. We had a lady open the door, and I thought I was in for it. And I've never be seen again, but he strong-armed me, and we came out of there. And we're so honored to have him here and the Microsoft team do so much for us, and we're very grateful for that. Aaron is an icon in the business. He's really become an icon in Utah in terms of business development, opportunity, future opportunity. If you haven't looked at their product, go to Pluralsight and take a look, and you'll immediately know how valuable what they do there is for our community. And we're so grateful for him. He's very difficult to get because everyone wants a piece of him today, and we're so thankful he's here. Heather is, MarketStar is such a valuable participant in education, just from their founder, Alan Hall. Many of you have heard him before. Great leader, great technical mind, and Heather is it's a great honor to be here with us. She also lives in the district, which we know where she lives now, so we're going to do that more. And Lonze Miss Hewitt has done such a great job being a lighthouse school for us. Great leader. Every time you walk into Canyon Creek, you can feel the energy, you feel the passion, and see the great things she's doing for our students. So we're honored to have her. Dr. Toon, thank you. Just real quick for me, you know, I love education, first of all, but my first job back in the system, I started at Clearfield High, then I coached for a couple of years at Utah State, came back to Weber High School, and I had a room at Weber High School, and down the hall from me was what soon to become the Mark Reed of Weber School District, a guy named Dave Brooks. Every time I'd go into Brooks's office, he'd be reading one of those thick books on Java or C++, and I didn't get it. And he told me it was going to be important. I should have listened closer. But what I did with Dave was I'd take my floppy disk down to him, and I'd write quizzes and worksheets on it, and I'd have Brooks print them for me. And I thought he was light years ahead of everybody, because he could print like quizzes off a floppy disk. But, you know, about the same time, I had the opportunity to hear Daniel Pink and Bill Daggett on the same platform. And it kind of came together for me at that time, because Daniel Pink, if you've heard him, he talks about creativity and empathy being the two skills that are going to be so critical for future learners. And then Bill Daggett, you know, of course, is a great futurist, great educator, and it really resonated with me, and it really stuck at that moment that what is important in education is future preparation. You know, because we do a lot of work and we profess to care about kids, and if we equip them not to encounter the future and succeed, I feel like we're doing a disservice. You know, you couple that with watching the educational reform that's tried to take place over the past 20 years, and I think that being technically agile is critical. And so I've kind of made that a real, you know, it's certainly not the only point of school leadership and district leadership, but a real critical component for kids. And so that's kind of my personal journey to where I'm at.
So, I'm Heather Barnes. I'm a vice president at a local company by the name of MarketStar. Microsoft, sorry. And Microsoft is one of our clients. If you don't know MarketStar, we've been around for 30 years. It's our 30-year anniversary, started by a gentleman by the name of Alan Hall, that if you're local, you know Alan. He's been around for a long time. Super dynamic guy. Had a vision for a company 30 years ago when he was selling, he was working for Novell, or one of those companies that started up down in the Utah County region, selling, they had a standalone spell checker product that they would put into retail office supply stores. You think about what's now Office Max or something like that back in the 80s. And he was the CEO of that company, and frankly, the product was failing miserably because nobody knew it existed and nobody knew how to use it. And so, born from that was the company that I work for today, MarketStar. Today, we have among 50 to 60 top Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 brands, and that we're supporting and augmenting their sales and marketing teams. And I love what we do there. So First of all, let me back up and say I am a product of the Davis County School District. I was a Davis Dart way back when. Thank you. I have 3 children in the school system here between high school and elementary school. And I'm a mother who taught in this district for over 30 years and a mother-in-law who also taught in the district for quite some time. And I grew up as a child of a teacher, and my heart goes out to every single one of you because you work tirelessly to make sure that our kids are well taken care of. So thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. I think there's a special place in heaven for people like you. To that end, I'm excited to be here and honored, so thank you. I do think that this is an amazing district with amazing teachers and educators, and but I am biased, I will tell you. On top of that, 2 passions for me. I've been at Market Star for just over I'm coming up on my 19th year anniversary, and my intent was to get a little background in selling technology. I had a software sales job prior to that, and went in thinking I'd stay for a couple years and then leave. And the opportunities there have been endless, and I'm so grateful for that, to be able to stay here where I grew up and have an amazing career. 2 passions for me. One is I love kids. I couldn't be an educator because I don't think I could be in a classroom all day long, but I've got a little wanderlust in me, but I love kids, and I love taking young people early in their career and helping them progress and seeing them through. So frankly, there are a lot of employees that have worked for me that are now at Mr. Scottard's place of business, and in addition to that, we've sent people all over the world, which is a fantastic opportunity for me. Specific to that, I've honed in most recently on girls, literally girls and young women that want to go sell technology, because on the flip side of coding, there's a whole nother realm for marketers and salespeople in this space and in this business. So hopefully tonight I can talk to you a little bit and share my ideas about and my thoughts about how to get these students ready, even in elementary school, to come into this world and help us sell and market this technology. Thank you.
My name is Bonze Hewitt, and I'm the principal at Canyon Creek. And I'm curious as to why I'm here with all these industry people, so I don't know what the goal is. I'm curious to see how it works out. I am the oldest elementary principal. I'm probably all the principals, frankly. I don't think Kevin Percy passed on that baton when he retired, and I didn't appreciate it all, but here I am. And so it's funny, when I look back over time, I've been around for a long time. When I graduated from high school, I went to college. I took swimming, typing, and psychology. They've been very useful. And I decided I wanted to get married and have babies, so I did that. And then after my children were born, I got a job as a first grade teacher aide. And I loved that job. And my teachers always gave me their little resource kids to work with. And I loved those little kiddos. I had no idea what resource was. I didn't know there were resource classes in schools even. I was unaware of that. And I loved those little kids, and I found out I could make a difference. And I decided to go back to school and get my degree in special education, elementary ed and special education. And the rest is history. I taught special ed for 13 years and been in administration the rest. So when I was raising my children, our first computer was a TI, a Texas Instrument. It played Pong. I believe maybe Donkey Kong eventually. I don't know what else they played. I can't remember. I'm not a gamer. I'm no good at it. I can even fail at Pong. So then we got the floppy disk drive. I could never type all the DOS stuff like backslash, colon, what does that mean? So I went out and bought a word processor. I bet many of you didn't even know you could buy a word processor. It only had memory enough to possibly print that page you were working on. Sometimes it failed. And so I type up all of my work for school on a word processor. We didn't have a printer, but the word processor would print it out most of the time, of course, not always. And so sometimes my I would be in the office at the university, and I'd cut and paste, and I'd like tape my corrected words over because the word processor was kind of clunky. And my teacher's like, why do you always send me copies of your work? And I said, because this is what my original looks like. I had all these words taped all over to fix it because the word processor, it wasn't so great. And so I'm very appreciative of what we have, the technology we have today. And it's been so amazing to see where education was and where it is now. It's so important to be forward-thinking and to take advantage of what we have in our district. Our superintendent has this great vision, and I know it sounded really scary to a lot of people. It's a wonderful vision. And when we have amazing teachers, sometimes we just need to step out of their way. Sometimes they know more than we do in certain areas. It's still important to watch them and analyze what they're doing and see if it's good for kids. Sometimes you will be so amazed. Actually, at my school, I'm almost always amazed. I have such a wonderful group of teachers, and I'm so grateful for them. Thank you.
You know, I've come to these events always to learn, and I have now found out where copy-paste actually got named as a feature. I never knew you were the origin story for that. You should have trademarked.
Mine was copy tape. So it didn't show the line.
Copy-tape, got it.
That's great. So we don't necessarily need to go down the line in order every time. If you would share with us, let's kind of turn our thoughts to learning, because that's the business we're in. As educators and as industry as well, what is, in your mind, one of the greatest learning experiences you've ever witnessed? Whether it was you as a student, or when you were visiting a classroom, or whether it happened in the workplace somewhere, what's the greatest learning experience you've ever seen?
I'll go. The seat is still not working on round 2 either. I'll share a couple maybe. A personal one and a couple that I've observed. And I think one that for me stood out is actually at my daughter's school, and one of the things that I've done ever since my daughters were born. I have 3 daughters, and all the way through when they told me to stop doing it, is volunteer in their classes. At a certain age, that ends. And our daughters, this is actually a bit later on with our daughter's high school, where there was simply a orchestra, school orchestra. And in the school orchestra, this was a mandatory class, and first year sounded like first year, where a bunch of kids had never played before and each got told or picked an instrument, which I'm sure you've all been subjected to that experience before. And we had a teacher at that school, and he taught band and orchestra, and every concert always sounded kind of the same. And they changed teachers. At some point. They changed about a year and a half in. It's a newer school, they changed teachers. And the same kids with the same experience, within literally about 3 to 4 weeks, because I volunteered and got to see this, sounded completely different. And I knew it was the same kids, because I volunteered at her school. Nothing changed. It was the same instruments, it was the same music pieces, and I had seen 2 years of this prior to this, so it wasn't on week 4 of that previous teacher did they get any better. In fact, end of year concert and beginning of the year concert sounded pretty much the same. And the ability of a teacher to come into this place and take something that is obviously not a skill that all the kids have and not all of us have, and find it and help them find it, I was in awe. I was in complete awe. And I spent a lot of time talking to her just to understand. And she told me she did one thing, and she does one thing, and she said she's done it all her career. And she tells everybody to stop trying to play their best, stop listening to themselves, and start listening to all the other kids around them. And what happens in her experience when they do that is they start helping each other. They forget about themselves. They hear the better students. They learn from them. They see the students that they can start helping to. They start getting, to some degree, competitive, to some degree, social in the learning, and get together in pairs afterwards and try to improve to be the best in the brass section. And all of a sudden, and the word empathy that you brought up, I think, is key here, that trait, which has nothing to do with musical skill, is what takes individual learning, turns it into collaborative learning, and everybody listening to each other, and within literally weeks, every week after every week, they got better without that teacher or the orchestra leader doing anything different other than that guidance. And it's one story, there are many, but it was phenomenal to see. And it had nothing to do with teaching them how to go better or how to strum or any technique at all. That's all she did, and is a story that sticks with me for sure.
I love that, thank you.
Anybody else want to go? Go for it. She's got it.
So, funny enough, in our industry, years ago, we were selling computer components for Intel. And I had this team of 30 some odd young college kids that were in the local tech sales program, but we were selling computers. One day, I asked them how many people had put together a computer. And to my dismay, it was probably less than 10% that had actually touched components and put computers together. And so most of you already know this, but the minute that we decided that, I worked with my counterparts at Intel, we brought in components for everyone, and we did workshopping around that. It changed the way they sold that product forever in their entire career. We actually had measurable success, which I won't get into in terms of Mark's success in selling, but even I had never put together a computer. I knew, I don't even want to tell you what I did to get the job. They brought me in for an interview. Somebody told me, oh, you got to know networking. I knew nothing about networking. So I grabbed Networking for Dummies, read the book, went in and interviewed, and they were so desperate to put a body in the chair. I got the job, and thankfully maintained that and then started moving up. But sadly, to my dismay, many people have been selling that stuff and never touched it. And so as much as, it's a simple piece of advice, but as much as you can give your students hands-on learning, and most of our students that are in this space, I find, or most of our employees, are very visual in their learning. And so they have to see it, touch it, feel it. Some of them can read it and understand it immediately, but I think the vast majority of our employees typically have to put together a server. If they're selling high-end servers, they have to go in and rack those servers. They have to touch the components. They have to understand how they fit together. And so I know it's simple, but it stands the test of time, almost a principle, if you will. If they can see it, touch it, put it together, and figure out how it works, their ability to understand it and learn it will be exponentially better and faster than that if only they were able to read it. That was my experience.
I'm so glad to hear that. I had this son that would take things apart, but he could never put them back together. And so I would take him to DI and I would buy computers and televisions and the motor, and he'd take them apart and I bought him a bin to put all the parts in. And that really paid off. He actually put stuff together now, so it's really great. I didn't realize what I was doing. So when we look at amazing things that have been really great in education, to see that learning, I remember one day I was in an assembly. I'm going to speak only about Canyon Creek, since that's must be why I'm here. So we had an assembly, and probably we were stalling. I don't remember, probably the technology wasn't working. And so I just started talking to the kids, buying some time, and we were talking about the engineering process. And I said, what happens if it doesn't work? And they're like, it's okay. You just try it again. And they started talking to us about the engineering process. That was one of the first things that we studied when we went there. When we started our school, we all started at a level playing field of not knowing very much about what we were going to do. I had some goals. I just didn't know how we were going to achieve them. But you have to start someplace. So we started with the engineering process. And the greatest thing it taught the children was they're not afraid of failure. And I think what a great gift that is to give to children, that they know it's okay. Failure's not bad. We just try it again, make a plan, and try it again. That's a great thing. Another situation is with our teachers. As we were teaching them, I'm wondering how much pedagogy was really taken to heart. Do they really understand and believe what we were teaching? So at the end of the first year, when we were interviewing for new teachers, because we were growing rapidly, and still are, I would turn the interviewees, when they had questions, I would turn those questions to the teachers. And when I heard the teachers talk to them and show that passion about what we were doing at our school. It was just beautiful. I was so thrilled to see that they really do believe in what we were doing. They really do know what we were doing. Because you can teach your teachers all the same thing at the same time, but they grow differently. Some grow rapidly, some grow slowly, but even though they're in different levels, they still all have that same belief system. And I feel very proud of that. I'm very proud of our teachers.
That's awesome. Yeah, the story that comes to mind for me has to do with the remarkable things that can happen with technology in education. Have you heard the stories of researchers who have dropped iPads into remote villages and without any instruction, and the kids just pick them up and then they study what they're able to learn? Pluralsight has its own version of that. Because we created this platform essentially that has thousands of courses on all the latest programming languages, things like data science, machine learning, AI now, cloud computing, cyber, and we've just put it out there, which is kind of like dropping those iPads into a remote village, because anyone, anywhere can get access to our platform now. And they can learn from industry experts who happen to be somewhere else in the world. Before, they would have never had access to that teacher. Now they do. So I told this story a year ago at our user conference. There was this young man named Akin in Africa. He was in Kenya. And he started learning JavaScript. He was a teenage boy, probably 18. Graduating from secondary school, trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life, and found Pluralsight. Was able to learn JavaScript. And then through our assessment capability, which is one of the unique things we have on our platform, he could test himself. And we basically give him what's like an SAT score for JavaScript. And he could tell that he was at expert level with JavaScript. So he now knows that he's at the same proficiency level as the developers in the Bay Area. And think about what that creates for Akin and his ability to create a new future for himself. So really, really exciting stuff is happening right now when technology and education come together to create these new possibilities.
Love that.
Go ahead, Dr. Tinley.
Great.
Go to the next one.
Thank you. Let's think about students. They're our product, right? They come into our buildings. We have 72,000 of them coming in and out of our buildings every day. What is it that they're going to need to be successful in the next 20 years?
Computer science.
I'll start with that.
Yeah, please.
Kind of build off the last question. One of the greatest, when we introduce anything, we realize as a leadership team that there's going to be a certain amount of resistance to it, no matter what it is, even, a bonus. We won't get the check right or something. So everything has a certain amount of resistance, and technology is certainly not immune to that, and can become almost to a paranoia state at times these days. But one of the opportunities I had was the opportunity to work on starting a school that was all digital, and there was a lot of lack of knowledge and paranoia about it, and the one thing that people continually went to was the lack of socialism in terms of social interaction it was going to create. And it was just a real remarkable thing that to a student, they came in and left at an incredibly higher social ability than they came with. And so I go back to what I said about developing that empathetic learning ability. And that isn't the ability to feel necessarily, it's the ability to put yourself in someone else's position to know what they need. And so when I think of learners, I go back to my experience, that great learning experience. I used to always tell parents, when they come into the school, I said, the thing we want to wear out most, you know, they were nervous, when you're giving my kid a computer, is he gonna break it? I said, the thing we want them to wear out most is the hinge. And I'd say that because you watch kids when they move with a computer, they grab it by the hinge. And so we always wanted to get heavy hinge use, because that meant they were moving, they were going to talk, and it just was, you know, it's crucial for learners today, that ability to interact with skill.
What else? 20-year future.
Well, look, I mean, I do think computer science is really important. I mean, we're missing the mark on that today, and it doesn't mean every child needs to become a computer scientist. We don't believe every student needs to learn to code, but we do believe every child needs the opportunity. They need access to the education. So we believe every school should teach it. And if we don't do that, I think we're not preparing them for the future. It's a fundamental literacy now, like reading, writing, math, like just understanding the technology that our kids are living with every day. You know, the language behind it is just an important foundational element. And I do think we need to teach our children how to learn differently through technology. Like, I mean, think about how we're learning today. Like, the generations today are learning new things. It's different than what it was like, you know, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And so we need to evolve how we're teaching them to learn beyond school.
It is, you know, just to build, you know, a couple of concepts. First of all, fully agree on the computer science notion. And the best analogy that I've heard that you came close to touching on is, you know, we learn physics, we teach physics, we teach chemistry, just so we understand the basics, biological system of everything around us.
Yep.
And yet there is just as much technology right around us, and if we don't learn, it's computer science, the hardware, learn how it works. It doesn't mean you have to have a profession in it. But not everybody becomes a doctor, not everybody becomes a scientist, not everybody becomes a chemist.
That's right.
And yet we consider that a basic foundation. But the place that I'll focus kind of goes back to, in my mind, the thing that is constantly changing is the content and the skills and the technology around us. The core abilities to learn, the core abilities to interact with other people, and problem solve and persevere through problem solve. And it's much more, I think the core, those abilities, which are not necessarily competencies or specific skills, are the ones that are the breakthrough ones. I forgot to mention the story about the teacher. The person they brought in to solve for the fact that the orchestra and band teacher left, she was the choir teacher. She did not know how to teach instruments. That was not her profession. In the same way that, you know, most teachers today don't know how to teach computer science. But there's stuff like Pluralsight out there, and there's other coding, Code.org and other platforms out there. But the teachers and where they can spend time with the kids is how do you instill curiosity? How do you instill confidence? How do you instill the ability and the desire both to learn, but willingness to fail, willingness to try and work together with others? That becomes way more important than any specific topic. If I go look, and I'll just reflect on Microsoft for a second as a company, a learning company. For those that have tracked us on the outside, I think the news, there's enough news out there where Microsoft over the last 5 years has gone through a transformation, and definitely as our position in the market has changed, and our software has changed, and the usage of it has changed in many different ways, stemming from this refresh moment with the new CEO, Satya Nadella. In reality, he didn't teach all the people at Microsoft better coding skills. That's not the journey we've been on. It's not you need to learn a new language. We were coding in some old language and we needed a new language. The entry exam into Microsoft or the interview process didn't bring in smarter people with different skills. He focused on one thing, and it was growth mindset and being willing to actually confront the fixed mindsets that we had and being willing to try and fail and being willing to actually experiment and learn in a sincere way. That's all he focused on, which then created the transformation internally for us. And it wasn't about any specific content that got disseminated in the company. It really was about that learning ability.
And those are the skills that are AI proof.
Yes.
Like, those are the skills that a computer will not be able to replicate.
That's a very good point.
You industry folks will be really pleased to know that
So last year, the Superintendent Nui told us all that every child should be learning coding in our schools. And so hopefully that's happening. It's happening in our school. We also have a coding club after school, and we have a group of, they were all boys this year. I was hoping to get more girls. Last year there were some girls, but this year they're all boys. And so he's doing Scratch Junior with one group and Scratch with another group. One of the things that, you know, it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. I think certainly AI is very important. I know that's going to be the future. But we don't have those skills right now to know what's in the future, so we need to teach those skills now. One of the things that I have really loved the process through was the 21st century learning design skills and teaching that we do. Microsoft has a Microsoft Educator Community where you can go on just with your DSD email and you can create your own account. You can take courses. They have a complete 21st century learning design group of apps. I know that's wrong. Anyway, I can't figure out Strand.
She was waiting for Microsoft.
Strand. I don't know.
Did you notice they didn't say
No, nobody says
To teach those important skills for these kids. One of them is communication. There needs to be communication in multiple modalities. You know, not just in writing, not just in speaking, but to maybe do some writing and include a link to a video, or do a blog. We have some students who do some podcasting, and it's really fun to watch them podcast as the children are writing down what they're going to say, and they're sharing in the room. They're taking a turn, and then they'll take their pencil and somebody will say something they planned, and then they're like erasing and coming up with something else, and they're constantly revising their script that they're writing on demand as to what they want to say in their podcast. And what great skill that is, that they're kind of developing on their own because the need is there. So our kids need to learn collaboration. We have these beautiful hallways that when our school was first built, I thought, oh, all this waste of room. Why didn't they make our classrooms bigger? How silly was I? Those collaboration spaces are used so beautifully all the time with our kids, except for during testing. And this week, no collaboration. So the kids are just constantly out in the hallways collaborating in different groups and using those skills. I love the fact that you guys are talking about empathy. That's one of the things that we've been talking about a lot as well. In this world that doesn't show empathy a lot, at least our models are not showing empathy, and we need to teach that to our children. So one of the things that we are going to implement next year are We Schools, and doing some solving some real world problems and creating empathy with our children as they're developing a plan to work with other communities and learn about other communities and do some service for them, that will create empathy. I think it's very important.
You touched on a couple of things. You touched on teaching communication skills, for example, right? I'm sitting here communicating right now and presenting, and that's a big part of my job in the tech industry is exactly that. And it's interesting, again, coming with technology. Flipgrid, for example, one of the most interesting things, which is, you know, the product and a team that we acquired that does fantastic work. Hopefully, a number of you are familiar with it. We'll be showing it tomorrow as well. But one of the most interesting things I learned about Flipgrid, where the kids use video to respond to questions and prompts from their teachers, is that we don't, on purpose, Flipgrid does not allow editing of the videos. So a kid creates a video, and before they post it back up to the grid to the teacher and for the class to see, they can only retake the video. And one of the most important metrics that actually the team cares about is how many retakes are happening. Because that retake is the kid looking at their video and going, that's not good enough. I'm going to take another take before I share that with my class. I'm not explaining the problem clearly enough. I'm not showing up well enough and concise enough. That's learning happening in a presentation skill. I often joke with my team and can only wish we're being recorded, which is awesome. Football, no, I mean that sincerely. Football players, every Monday morning after the game, what do? They go watch tape. And they learn from that. It's a feedback loop right there. And we go around, you know, if we had a feedback loop in our corporate meetings and teacher staff meetings, if there was video of every one of those meetings, And we all got to see it the day after. Most people are shaking their heads, I don't want to see it. I will go back to my previous company growth mindset. You want to learn, and mistake and failure is okay. If we had that feedback loop and seeing how we're doing, we would improve so quickly. And being able to do that with technology, and there's ways to go do that, is super valuable.
Or it might create neuroses. But, no, I love that. You know, one of the things, everything that has been mentioned up here today is frankly what I put on my list, right? Empathy, communication, and good communication, right? Don't forget those basic skills that you teach every day. How do you write? How do you formulate thought in your writing? We see some pretty horrendous emails, even at the collegiate level coming out of school, and you know, we have to take them back down to ground zero and bring them back up. But so those are the skills. There's one other that, if I sum it all up, emotional intelligence. You're seeing a lot of studies on emotional intelligence in general, and emotional intelligence is a combination of all the things that have been mentioned up here, but then it actually puts it in practical use. And I will tell you, it was last year, we got invited at East Layton Elementary to an award ceremony that a few of the students in the school got awarded for certain behaviors that they had exhibited through the year. And they gave an award for emotional intelligence, and I almost stood up and gave the principal a standing ovation, because it's something that we have to teach our kids that is so overlooked. And frankly, the studies are showing that you can have the highest scores in any academic subject, but if they lack emotional intelligence, these kids are gonna struggle. And I see it every day in our work, right? And we have employees that are, you know, high-level pre-sales, post-sales engineers, all the way down to an entry-level, what we call leads development reps, that are pretty much the front line of any sales process. So don't forget those two things. The third thing that I'll mention, and you may be familiar with it, but a professor, I think out of Pennsylvania University, just published a book about a year and a half ago called Grit. And grit, if you've heard about the grit scale, it's pretty amazing. And it teaches these kids how to persevere. I hate to say it, but I get so frustrated with my own kids at times when they are so willing to give up so easily on something that would teach them, you know, phenomenal life lessons. In fact, thanks to you guys and all your coding that's going on in the school district, my son came to me a couple weeks ago and said, "You're a technologist, teach me how to write this website." I had to write a website. And it's so funny because literally I don't know anything about coding. And I've been in an industry around technology all my life, but, and I'm old, so I'm gonna give you that, because they didn't teach coding when I went to school. The other thing that I would tell you is, and we were talking about this before we started, there are some kids that are just naturally drawn to this stuff. And there are other kids that could be exceptionally good at it, but they're not gonna put their hand up. So seek those kids out. I'm reading right now a book called Quiet that's specific to introverts. Some of you have probably heard it. It's a phenomenal book that teaches us how to go out and seek those students that aren't going to raise their hands or stand up in a classroom and put themselves out there. So the video concept's really interesting to me, because at one point in my life, I do believe I was an introvert, and that was in the classroom. If I could sit in the back of a classroom and just get through the class and not say anything, I couldn't be happier. I didn't get the best experience out of my education because of that. I had to go back and retrain myself. Look for those kids that are out there, they're smart, and they can go a long way if you teach them these basic skills. So from an emotional intelligence standpoint, I look at interpersonal communications, empathy, how do you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and then see it from their perspective. And mind you, I'm the flip side of Aaron. I'm all about selling, and I'm about, not that he's not, but my life is selling, marketing, you know, yeah, he's selling just fine, by the way. Yeah, but that's the world that I live in. And so when we bring these folks in, you know, and they're college students or barely graduated from high school, and we can put them in these roles and then start training them on all that stuff, they're a great resource for Aaron.
So I love that. And one of the things that I hope that we understand as educators is that these characteristics that you just described is essential for our students. They're also essential for us as professional staff as we try to find ways to give them to our students. we have to have grit, we have to have emotional intelligence, we have to have content knowledge and skill. We have to know when we can try something and try again when it doesn't work out. All these things are aspects that we're striving to develop internally in our own growth mindset, but then also apply to our students through our instruction. I want to take just a few moments and take a break from our moderated questions and allow our audience members to ask you some questions. Audience members, we have a couple of microphones. Ms. Kathy Larson and Dr. Ryan Hansen have our microphones. If you have questions for specific panelists, that's great. Or if you have a more general question, then we can just have whatever panelists feel like responding can take those questions. So just wave your hand if you've got a question, and Ryan or Kathy will help find you the microphone.
I got a question, can I ask it?
Oh, you already have the microphone.
All right. It's good to have a mic. This is for Mr. Stoddard. I'm a big fan, by the way, of your vision. Your platform is awesome. And how you, I think you call them authors, how you bring authors in is to provide the content is also really innovative. Have you thought about that type of a model for public education?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I would say Khan Academy is probably the best example of that today. You know, Sal Khan had a similar vision, which was to make the world his classroom for math. You know, that's where it all started. I mean, it stemmed from having I think it was a nephew or a niece on the other side of the country that, you know, he couldn't be with, you know, to help, like, you know, actually doing the work at the table together. So he started recording videos on YouTube to share with her. And then it just all went from there. So I think you're seeing other models out there that public education are now embracing. And I think Pluralsight can fit into that, you know, because we're focused more on the professional spectrum, there's sort of a bridge between, you know, the higher grades of K through 12 and the professional world, and higher ed's in there in between as well, where we can contribute and make a difference. But I think the model is already there. It's active, and you're seeing more things emerge like Khan Academy. And it's making a big difference. I mean, how many of your kids have looked at videos on Khan Academy? Like, most of the room. You know, so it's happening.
But, you know, I'll jump on that for a second. I had that conversation with Sal Khan about a year ago, maybe a bit longer. And while the answer numerically is going to be 90% will have said our kids have looked at videos on Khan Academy, he will tell you that so far he is completely failing at what he's tried to do. And I'll use it to make a point. And he used it, you know, the conversation, he used it to make a point as well. His vision was actually kind of to flip the classroom. One teacher needs to teach the Pythagorean theorem. We'll find the best teacher that teaches the Pythagorean theorem, record that video, and all the kids can go learn from that teacher. And then in the classroom, let's go use that time to solve problems and actually do things with our hands, physical models, and collaborate on solutions and work with Pythagorean theorem to really internalize, learn it, allow the teacher to go observe and provide feedback to the kids, help those that understood it and not. And where Khan Academy is actually used is teachers will teach the Pythagorean theorem in the class and then say, there's also a video you can go look at if you didn't understand in the evening, and classroom time hasn't transformed. And a lot of where we're seeing technology broadly, and one of the places where, you know, one of the reasons we're excited with Davis and the partnership and the things that are happening here where it's being, you know, transformative and doing things correctly is, it's not just about taking the same process and adding technology to it. It's not just about digitizing what you did. If I now have a computer and I can type up, or a word processor if it's a couple of years, and I can type up my assignment and submit it, and the teacher over the weekend sometime will grade it and send it back to me a week later with a grade, and I've already passed that material anyway, nothing really has happened. Sure, we're using a computer, but you're probably not going to see any value from a learning outcome perspective or a skills perspective for that student. If, on the other hand, an assignment is all of a sudden being done in a collaborative way, and maybe it's a video assignment on Flipgrid, like with my daughters who use it, where a 1-minute book assignment, literally a book report, fourth grader, doing a 1-minute recording of their book. They're learning presentation skills, as I talked about earlier. But what's more interesting is 30 kids posted 1 minute of video on their book report onto the grid. That grid generated 10 hours of video because the kids started replying to each other. I read that book too. It was interesting. If you like that book, here's an interesting book. I thought it was really interesting what you thought about this author. Here's an author that I found. And that's learning happening and expanding what was a 5-minute assignment for my daughter to 4 hours engaging with the material. And that's where technology is all of a sudden completely changing what you're doing and adding instructional hours and completely changing what's happening in the class versus just digitizing what's happening in the class. And SALT's still on that mission.
Yeah.
And it needs the teaching and learning to change. It needs, to your point, the teacher skills to change and what we do in the classroom. That was fascinating when you said earlier, this week, no collaboration. Because in work, for the rest of your life, you will likely be doing your job in isolation. So we want to see that you can go through that one.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, to get the full sense for Sal Khan's vision, I'd recommend reading his book. It's called The One World Schoolhouse, and it is this vision of what it could be if we adapted the entire educational environment to embrace technology and these scalable solutions in the way we're describing. But it's not fully happening today. But the model you're seeing at Pluralsight is in it. Like, it's available, it's there. And we just have to continue to drive the innovation like Superintendent Newey is doing here with Davis. And they are leading the charge in the state. Did you see the code on the windows when you walked in the door? That says something.
Yes, it does.
But there's more we can do. And there's more with these project-based learning experiences that are more like the real world, which you've also experimented with.
Well, just to capitalize on what Aaron and Ron are talking about, one of the things I get really concerned about is our lack of patience as teachers. For instance, we would be very concerned that we're stuck on one novel. And why aren't we getting on to the next one? Because the next one in the sequence is up. Quit talking about the last one. Instead of saying, what are we learning from the process of that 10 hours that are focusing on the thought generation just from one learning activity? We've got to, that's where educators, like, it's something that they've done so well at Canyon Creek, for instance, why with Lonzé is that re-engineering of the adult mind of what learning is and what that means to, it isn't about content, it's about process and use of content benefit learning.
100%.
That's great. Did we answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Great response.
Other audience questions tonight? Representative Ballard has a question. Dr. Hess, bring the mic down. Thank you.
I have to say this is so exciting to have all of you in one room and to collaborate with the best, right, in this district. So there were two things the legislature did this year, and then I want to know what else we can do to help. One of them that was done was the state funded the opportunity for your teachers to get trained of how to teach computer engineering instead of having computer engineers coming into the schools, so that you can take those skills and learn how to do that. And then the second thing is we also provided more funding for professional development, so that you can have the state pay for almost all of additional professional development courses and classes that you have. So what I want to know, with how great this district is in trying to create a model of teaching, how can the legislature also help from the state level to support you and to be a catalyst or to motivate more private entities to step in? How can we help you?
On the specific computer science bill that you're mentioning, the grant that was approved this year in the session was for $3.1 million of one-time funding to begin this process. The most important thing we need to do as a next step for the state is to expand that to up to $7 million a year in ongoing funding. And that's the main thing we need.
And I think that's how it started out.
That's where it should have landed. It didn't land there. So, you know, if you can help us with that, it would be a big impact. We need all of you to write your legislature, your representatives in the legislature to ensure that they know how important this is to us. And if we can get to that point of funding, I'm highly confident that with the people who are committed to this, and the partnerships we have here within the state with Pluralsight, with Code.org, and the entire Silicon Slopes business community, we will get there. And we could be the very first state in the country, in the world, to have accomplished this. To get computer science taught in every K-12 school in the state, including rural Utah.
Okay, I'll be in contact with you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please do.
Anything else you can think of that would help from the state level?
What can policymakers do?
You know, I think my thought goes to the untapped work market here that's not really on the workforce, right? We have a great women in tech organization here in Utah that supports a lot of that from that perspective. And I think that if we can connect there, and like I said earlier, I think about what would be helpful. I don't know that, I'm not exactly sure what the vision is for the legislation of this, but we need to push companies to create jobs that have flexible work hours. I mean, I think about the number of female population that would go into the workforce if they had more flexible work hours. And so bills that would support that would also help, right? Bills that help support and require, and we're seeing this more and more outside of our state, especially with the companies the technology companies we're working with. They have amazing benefits for their employees. And I know that's a tough situation, but, you know, paternity and maternity leave is becoming, something that is far more common outside of our state than inside of our state. And if we're as family-friendly as we say we are, there ought to be some bills around that to support that. I think we could tap into a workforce that we're not tapping into today with flexible work hours. And I think maybe the legislation helping support that back out to the business leaders to have more foundation there would probably help. And we can tease that out a little bit more, but I definitely think that there's a workforce out there that would probably come join us, or potentially to shift careers if they have those options and opportunities. So somehow we work together to figure that out. We can do something.
And all that continued, funding is always a big issue. You don't need to hear that again, but continued emphasis on flexibility in the traditional sense. I think, in reading One World Schoolhouse that Mr. Conn wrote, and in my evaluation of it, this is a big machine you're fighting against in terms of the 200-year-old process of education. And one of the things that I appreciate that we've been able to partner with is the competency-based model and being a competency-based district. But there needs to be, in my opinion, more work done from the legislative process on breaking down some of those long-held what education looks like in terms of structure in the way of giving us the flexibility needed to be able to configure with guidance and with parameters on how we're going to use funding, how we're going to, you look at Pluralsight. This is, you got to be probably one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing company in Utah. The reason for that is because they provide, in my opinion, they got a great product, but there's ultimate flexibility in acquiring knowledge and skill. And so, you take that, project that in education. We have great knowledge and skill in this room, but sometimes the limitations become tough in we're still looking at a similar model.
Yeah, I mean, the flexibility is what breeds innovation, and too much bureaucracy sort of snuffs it out.
Yeah. from a local standpoint, our headquarters are in Ogden, and we are always at the Weber State University, whether it's the business program, sales program, or the engineering and tech program. We're always at odds with them because it seems like the technology there, or what they're teaching, is lagging behind what we can go get here. And so we're in active conversation with them right now about how to utilize platforms like Pluralsight in lieu of a traditional credit. And so that conversation will always continue. And it's, you know, there's bandwidth constraint, right? There's so much that these people can do, only so much they can do. So to try and marry all of that together, there are opportunities to take advantage of that in the platform, in a traditional education space, if allowed. And we as MarketStar fully support that.
Rob, do you have any thoughts on
Yeah,
this?
I was going to, different direction, and I will fully admit I'm speaking with ignorance on specifics to Utah, and if I'm missing here. But an area that we have spent a lot of time at Microsoft is thinking about how do you make the technology accessible to everybody. And that is often associated with price, but I'm actually going to talk about inclusivity of children and students with learning differences, and the importance of funding and supporting and mandating screening and testing and support for all children. One of the things that we see, we're talking about computer science, we're talking about literacy. You know, to learn computer science, you need to learn how to read. And that is true, you know, in the early years, first, second, third, fourth grade, you're learning to read and write. And from that point on, you need to know how to read, whether it is for computer science, history, math, or anything else. And all the statistics are out there on how kids fall behind when that is a challenge that they have. And that, whether it is, you know, dyslexia or dyscalculia or other learning differences, those challenges exist, or English is a second language, which is obviously a case in the district as well for many. And if you go back to the inclusive and accessibility and those learning differences, one of the things that we know and see broadly is screening does not happen. Kids get screened for eyesight, for example. This used to be technology, right? Like that was technology, and it used to be that the first time you'd find out that you needed glasses was through screening that happens at school, or hearing happens at school. But there's so many other learning differences that are holding back kids that have all the creativity and potential. And when they get held back and don't discover that, and the interventions come too late, they've already fallen behind and can never really catch up. And the data and statistics are there. There are ways we'd be happy to help. We partner with a lot of nonprofits that are developing technology around screening. We have tools that we develop for interventions. But I'd say there's one of the most core basic building blocks, and funding and driving awareness for that with teachers and with the system is important.
I love that. Thank you.
So let me just summarize. So funding and flexibility, support for women, and screening. And I'd also like to work with you on that because my daughter had dyslexia and auditory processing, and I had to do everything on my own to get her caught up. And this year we funded a new screening opportunity that's for under second grade. But I think there's so much more we need to do, because if it's found early, then there's not problems.
We would be
So
happy to
I'd
partner.
love to do that.
Thank you. So, as we,
And
go ahead.
Dr. Tim,
Yeah.
just real quick, you know, literacy, numeracy coaches, raise your hand again. Let's give them a round of applause. And we preach this a lot at the district office and throughout. One of the real success markers of Davis School District, I'm convinced, especially from coming from another district and looking from the outside in, is that early establishment of great reading and numeracy ability. And that is so critical, the work that our coaches do and our early grade teachers do to establish that basis. Because you're exactly right. You've got to have great readers, and you've got to be able to do some calculation. And then, you know, then you can really use technology.
Amazing, thank you. As we wrap up, I appreciate all of you for being here. I'm going to give each of the panelists an opportunity to respond to one more question. And I'm going to, Eric Perron, I'm going to do you a favor. We're going to start with response A. We're going to go this way. So what's the single most important thing that you want this great audience to understand about the work of developing future-ready students? And then any wrap-up conclusionary thoughts you might have.
We need to get on board and we need to do it fast because things are, like I know I sound like a plug for Microsoft, but I just look at the apps that Microsoft has recently created. I haven't used half of them. Things are being created so rapidly and we're not using them and we're not keeping up that if we haven't even started, we're so far behind. We can't stay behind anymore. We need to get on board and we need to get going and we need to keep going. One interesting thing with being a Microsoft Showcase School, it only lasts for a year, and then you have to reapply. You have to show that you're doing continued learning, continued improvement. And at first I was a little disappointed. I thought, oh, I just like to keep that title. And then I thought, well, how brilliant is that? Because you do need to keep on learning and keep on growing. So it's built in beautifully to have that continued learning. It's very important to get on board. We cannot sit and hope that it happens. We need to make it happen.
For me as a local employer, I look at a couple of things, and we've talked about them already tonight, but I'll just wrap it up. If you give me one single item that I would wish that the schools would focus on, it is problem solving through and through. If we get people coming out of the schools, guys and gals that can actually critically think and problem solve, we can work through a lot of that other stuff with them. And I think that I get that it's not limited just to that. I know what goes on as I watch my own kids and what they're learning, but problem solving and just that can do it, don't give up attitude. I think there are more kids out there that kind of fall into some of the categories that we've talked about in terms of, you know, I venture to guess that most kids coming through your system don't really know what's out there for them. I was one of those kids that had no clue what I was going to be when I grew up, and it was frustrating because there are people with a defined destiny and path, and they decide and they move forward. But if these kids can problem solve, they'll go figure that out for themselves, and so that's the one thing that I would say. And thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight.
The one thing I would say is courage. It takes great courage to be a leader. It takes courage to confront what the future is and then take what you've done and say, either I'm on the right track or it's not good enough, I need to become more prepared, and it takes courage to be a leader. Risk is a big part of that. You cannot develop courage if you're afraid to risk, and so I just think that's so crucial to what we're doing.
My answer is 2 words. Can you guess them?
Plural size.
Computer science. And I'll go one step further to say, just embracing technology more in our schools and in our educational goals. There's a lot of debate around class size. What's the most appropriate class size? And we're always striving for smaller class sizes. And I actually think we should be flipping our mindset around that. I don't know that we're going in the right direction on that. We should be paying teachers more to get better teachers who can handle larger class sizes and leverage technology to teach them better. Yes, teachers? I think there's direction, there's a tremendous amount of possibility in that vision of, think about here in Utah, what's the average family size in Utah? Does anybody know? Number of kids? Yeah, it's like 4 to 5. So 4 to 5 kids. So, and the average income, does anybody know what that is? Per family? It's like 80,000. Okay? So that's across 2 parents, and if you count both wage earners, about 80,000. So 80,000 for 4 to 5 kids. That's what's going into our tax base to fund our education. Compare that to New York or the Bay Area, where the average income per household is above 200,000 to 300,000. and you've only got an average of 1 to 2 kids per family. And so we have to do something radically different here to be successful. Like, we have to think differently. Like, we have to use our resources more effectively. And I know we can. We just have to go execute on that vision.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ron, you have the last word tonight.
I will start by thanking the district and Superintendent Newey again. The room that we walked a mile towards and closed the doors behind, what I found in the room was a partner. And we as a technology company can only provide technology. We can't change teaching and learning. We cannot change the trajectory and the possibilities for kids with technology. That happens when we can partner with the teachers and the superintendents and the administrators and everybody in this room in taking that technology and figuring out how to change those lives. And that partnership requires a dialogue. And that partnership requires taking risks and being willing to try things together, and feedback from all of you to us as Microsoft and the rest of the technology vendors that you work with. We are evolving together and figuring out how to best bring what we know how to do into a classroom in the most effective way. But it only happens when there's an active dialogue coming back to us. We have a whole slew of folks here for tomorrow as well, where on the one hand, it's probably billed as we're coming to show and tell. On the other hand, we can tell you, and I can tell you on behalf of our teams, we're here to listen and learn. And as much as we listen and learn from you, I'll leave you with one other thought and then answer the original question. For everything that we've learned from this wonderful partnership, and it really is a model partnership and a model district in many ways in how you use technology, it isn't only helping your kids in Utah and here at Davis. We take that and improve the software. We take that and find patterns and tell other schools. And something that a teacher did today in one of the schools that one of the folks that visited saw, they're going to tell that story in another district around the world tomorrow and help that teacher. And your work gets elevated to impacting students that are using this software or the hearing of how you are using the software around the world, quite literally. So these partnerships are meaningful for what we can do for the kids in the district, but they are actually meaningful for kids around the world. So thank you on behalf of Microsoft and Superintendent Newey for the partnership that we forged in that room. It is absolutely an honor to be here and to be a partner in this journey that you're on. If I picked one thing, and we talked quite a bit, then I'll pick two.
Good boss.
I mean this with all sincerity, we work for you. So we are definitely not the boss, we are at your service. The first one is teaching empathy, and I think that there's just not enough of that in the world right now. And empathy is teachers being empathetic to the children, children learning how to be empathetic with each other, to the teachers. It is for us in our industry, I was sharing earlier, a quote that I like to ground us in, which is empathy breeds innovation. When you understand and are able to understand the problems or the opportunities that other folks are facing, you can help them and invent. It is the story from the school teacher, the orchestra, band and orchestra, where all she told them was listen to the other kids and start helping each other, and magic happened. Empathy would be one word because I think it is foundational to everything else and learning. And the other one is learn to learn. I think at the end of the day, we're talking about the future, and all of us know we don't know what it really looks like. And what skills and what technology and what tools. If we're asking you to learn every year what tools we're building, I don't know what we're building next year. That's going to come through this feedback loop. But learning to learn is probably the best skill kids can leave school with, because they will need to do that for the rest of their lives. We have here Pluralsight. What are they teaching? They're teaching coding where? In corporations like Microsoft. We're all coders. We need to continuously reskill and learn, and we're customers of Pluralsight because the technology is changing. And if you have that fixed mindset and that know-it-all mindset, and you think you're done learning, and now I can just live and work, then we are not setting kids up for success. Recognizing that and giving them those skills will set them up to figure out what that future is and frankly create that future for us.
Thank you. It's been an honor to moderate this session. I can't wait to review the video, and we'll make sure to share that with each of you as well. But to the audience members, we thank you for being here. Please enjoy a few more minutes at the end of the evening tonight. Enjoy some more refreshments, visit with each other, visit with us, and have a safe trip home. Can we give our panel a great